Well, Mom,
Yes, Robert.
thank you for joining me yet again.
Thank you for joining me yet again. Well, it makes it sound like I'm a guest on your podcast.
Oh, okay.
Don't you think so?
I mean, I don't know. Thanks for showing up. You're like, thank you for showing up.
Okay, I went into it a little aggressive.
Yeah.
Thank you for meeting me in the kitchen, Robert.
There you go. So,
Yes.
last week I talked about the joys of in the mental health of like working out and what it does for me. And, this week, last week we skipped 2 days and this week we skipped one. And I was thinking about skipping another. But
you mean skipping the gym?
Yeah, skipping the gym. Just because it's, life gets busy. And
Yes.
unfortunately, like sometimes cutting out the gym is the easiest option. Right. But we powered through it. And, you and I had talked on our walk, like, this was a big mental battle for us.
Very much so.
Yeah.
I mean, it was like, because I know that you mentioned, like getting past that little hurdle. It's like at 4:00 in the morning on a Friday, I'm like, I very easily could go back to sleep.
Yeah. I'm
But
ready to go to bed now.
I know. But the simple fact that we didn't, it just kind of gave me like a little boost in my mind. Like, you know what? I'm not going to let things stop me.
Yeah. Like we had mentioned on the last podcast, like just getting up and out is a W, is a win. And you start your day off with a win, you're in a good shape. So, So last week we talked about, the joys of working out and what it does for mental health. Today, for this week, you are going to take the lead and talk about something that you are going to educate me on.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. And I'm super excited. You know
Good.
what? And I just want to go into this. I mean, I have like this, I feel like I worked on a school report and I'm really proud of reporting this.
Yeah. And I think that's what's really cool about this kind of like style that we're going about it, right? Like, you have something of value to give. Versus like us being like, so how's the weather in Arizona? Or like, did you hear about the cow that,
has a smiley face on the side of it?
Smiley face on the side of it. Or like, you'll never guess what thing I saw one time where, 36 years ago.
Or the algae bloom in Florida.
Yeah. So this is, it provides more value to.
Yeah.
And I like that. So,
okay.
Mom, you have the reign.
Perfect. All right. So the subject that I am going to talk about today for me is the duality of having to actually address two issues that are in my life. I have to address my childhood trauma, and then I have to address the trauma that I called my adult life.
Sure.
So in this whole journey, first off, before I even start, I just want to let everybody know I'm not a counselor and I'm not a doctor. And everything that I share with you, I'm sharing with you as my point of view and just sharing my journey.
From your perspective.
From my perspective, in hopes that if you're on a journey or if you're stuck somewhere, maybe just by hearing me talk about my journey, it will help you maybe take that next step in yours. So
full disclaimer.
So with that said, going into dealing both childhood trauma and adult trauma. And when I say adult trauma, it was basically the trauma that kind of trickled over from my childhood, which led to addiction, alcoholism, and a gambling addiction. So it really made me take a big step back when I realized that I had two areas in my life that I had to concentrate on. And for reference, what I'm going to be referring to in today's talk is I'm going to be referring to a book from Abraham J. Tversky called Addictive Thinking. And then in my mind, I was like, okay, that's going to be the adult part of my healing. And I had gone and I had bought a book called The Deepest Well from Nadine Burke Harris. And this is Healing the Long-Term Effects of Childhood Trauma and Adversity. So I went into this with this whole ideology of like, wow, this is going to be great. This book for this part, this book for that part. I sat down, I was going to do a YouTube live, and I was going to dive into this book, The Deepest Well. And for some reason, I opened this book and instantly broke out in a sweat.
Really?
Just a cold sweat. And I was like, I can't do it. I can't cover the subjects that are in this book. And it really, and I was like in the middle of my life and I was coming like with all of these like ideas and everything. And it made me at that point realize is that everybody's healing journey is different.
Sure.
And this isn't the avenue that I needed to take at this point. Whether or not I ever dive into this book, I have no idea. This particular book is going a little bit too deep in that well too soon. So I took a step back and I found an article online from Solaria SOLARA, mental health. And it's how to deal with your inner child in 7 steps, which for me was much more, it wasn't as aggressive,
sure.
I guess I should say.
That's a good way of putting it.
You know, and I felt much more comfortable. So I'm going to read the 7 steps, and then I'm going to tell you how I'm applying that into everyday life.
Sure, love it.
Okay. So the first one is to acknowledge your inner child. You basically have to just know that things that have happened in your past, in your childhood, are affecting you today. You just need to realize that. Validate what happened. A lot of times, and it drives me crazy when people are like, just get over it. You know, you don't get over things that have happened in your past. You can deal with it. You can acknowledge it, but you just don't get over it. So you need to acknowledge the pain that you've been through, which a lot of times can be really uncomfortable. Yeah. And you can kind of just do that in the steps that you find comfort in. For example, the deepest well. It was too much too soon.
Sure.
Number 3, identify the form of neglect you experienced, which to me was kind of cool because like in our counseling, I never looked at my childhood and then how I parented you and Brandon as it wasn't physical abuse, but it was hostile.
Sure.
Okay. So now I can put the simple fact that I had a traumatic childhood due to all the yelling. And so you just have to basically give it a name. Number 4 is embrace your emotions. You know, a lot of times when you experience childhood trauma, you shut yourself off. Yeah. So you have to start to learn to embrace those emotions, both good, bad, or indifferent. Number 5, which I just made it really small. Number 5 is identify current manifestations of past hurts. Huge.
What do you mean by that?
Well, we're going to come back to that one. So keep number 5 a little asterisk on that one. Number 6, take steps to fill the gap. So basically you had things lacking in your childhood. You had a parent who nourished you. So you need to find avenues to find that now, whether it's...
You mean malnourished you, right?
Didn't nourish you.
They said that didn't nourish you.
Didn't nourish you.
You say nourishing would be good.
No. Okay. So you have to find things in adulthoods where, you know, you want to make sure that you do it in a healthy way. You don't want to have a reoccurring pattern of abuse. Sure. But you want to find a partner who, if you feel like an invisible child, who actually stops and listens to you, you want that in a relationship. And then 7 is mend the hurt by helping others. Okay. All right. So what I did is I took these 7 steps and I wrote them down in a journal, 1 step at a time. And so what I am doing is when a situation arises, I have them written down to where I can identify which part of these 7 steps is triggering me in my brain and making me go from being the parent to the child. Sure. Okay.
So like digressing back into the childhood.
Yes. Yeah. Okay. It's helping me keep my, she just ran around the side to where mud puddle is. So we have one part in our yard. Hold on, everybody. We just have to make sure Indy's not wallowing in the mud. So now I feel like in my journal, I have the 7 steps and I can grow from here, but I have my journal as my child. And then for the addictive thinking, I have the adult part. Sure. So now what I did is I applied these steps to a real life situation. Okay. And I have 2 examples of that. And then by all means, jump in and ask questions. Okay. Cause you did. And I already like, hold on to that one. Yeah. Okay.
You do this, but also at the same time.
Well, I wanted to talk about it in this scenario.
You were not ready for question taking.
Correct. Okay. I kind of wanted to give you like the rubrics of where I am taking situations and how I'm resolving them. So Brandon is going to be moving back into the house this month. Correct. And I was telling you some stuff, and I knew that the things I said you took wrong. You know, not that you took it wrong, but my message was received in a different way than I was trying to make it. Sure. Does that make sense?
I would say that's more accurate than saying I took it wrong.
Yes. Yeah. And so I felt like I could feel your walls kind of going up. And when I felt your walls going up, I got triggered to my inner child.
Sure.
So I knew what was happening. I knew that I was taking my conversation with you as an adult, and I was running right back to me as a child.
Sure.
So what I did when I was taking Indy for a walk is I kind of went over these 7 steps. And I realized that I was, hold on, let's go back to number 5. Identify current manifestation of past hurts. I was taking the simple fact that what I said to you triggered you. And so you kind of clammed up a little bit. I instantly went back to the invisible child who doesn't get heard the right way.
Yeah.
And so that's what number 5 is, identifying current manifestations of past hurts, taking something that happens today and going right back into your childhood hurts.
Sure. It's like muscle memory kind of thing.
Muscle memory.
Okay.
So since I identified that, I was able to be like, no, Lonnie, that's not what's happening. Robert, you know what? You're not 5. Robert's not your parent. That is something that's not a today's situation.
Sure.
So I was able to be like, as the parent, I need to address this with Robert and be like, you know what? I felt like what I said was taken, not taken wrong, but received in a different manner.
I think the words were like, did something I say upset you?
Exactly. And you were able to be like, yeah, you said, I took it like this. And then I was able to be like, well, that's not what I could see how you could take it that way, but that's not how I meant it.
Sure.
And so to me, by having this actually written out is helping me to be able to be like, what feeling am I feeling at this moment?
Yeah. Okay. It's kind of like a guide map.
Exactly.
Okay. That's fair.
And so, I was able to talk to you about that. And even like today, I was texting Brandon and telling him like, hey, you know what? We're going to be cleaning the house. You can bring things over. And I presented the information to him just as such. But I could tell by his responses, just like when you were kind of like putting your walls up, he was starting to put his walls up.
Sure.
So my text back to him was, I'm not trying to tell you how to move. My intention of this text is just to let you know what we are doing and to offer this to you. And so he texts back. He's like, yeah, that's exactly how I felt.
Sure.
So to me, it's again, it all comes down to where I'm going and where my next step is going to be and what the information I want to provide is literally trying to separate the 2 emotions and being able to be like, whatever interaction you and I have, we have it as mother and son.
Sure.
We should not have this interaction as son and 4-year-old Lonnie.
Sure.
And I think by seeing that is going to make our communication hopefully a little better.
Yeah, I would argue. I mean, not only that too, but with you kind of looking at it through this kind of lens, you're able to help Brandon and I kind of snap out of that like muscle memory, like reaction, like that instinctive, like jerky, like, oh, walls are up, because you're able to address it a little bit clearer. You're able to look at the problem differently.
Right.
Like for Brandon, when you're like, okay, I'm not telling you how to do it, but I'm giving you that offer. Like it's a lot like the therapist says, I'm handing you a green ball, but Brandon instinctively, he sees a ball and immediately thinks it's red. And so he instinctively like clams up and is like, this is a red ball. We're going to do red ball response.
Exactly.
Where you're more like, no, this is my intentions. This has always been a green ball. And this is how you may have perceived a red ball, but this is not where it's really at.
Exactly. And taking this one step farther, I also realized like, okay, for example, this conversation with Brandon and I.
Sure.
In the past, I would have been like triggered again by giving him this information of, I'm not telling you how to move. I'm just giving you the information.
Yeah.
And so his response was, okay. So in the past, I would have gone back to, I'm not getting the response from Brandon I want, So again, going back to being triggered. And I figured out this morning, and I think it's an important step, is that I gave Brandon the information of my true intention. What he does with it is up to him.
Sure.
Just like our conversation when what I said was perceived incorrectly, and I told you how I really meant to say it.
Yeah.
At that point, it's up to you. What you do with that information is what you're going to do with it next.
Sure. I mean, for example, we'll dive more into it, right? So you were like, oh, this is what I meant, and did I upset you by saying this is what I meant? And I said, yes, because this is how I received it, and then, I had told you how that conversation had made me feel, because you can't make me feel anyway. Only I can feel how I feel. Right. So that's one of the things the therapist has always said, like, nobody can make you feel a certain way. It's how you receive it. And I had received it a different manner than what you intended. And because I had explained as to how I perceived it, you were able to be like, oh yeah, no, that's not what I meant. And it's so weird how your intentions and how I received it were completely different from each other. And, it's really interesting thinking back on it, like how, had you not been like, hey, did I upset you or did I hurt your feelings? I mean, we're not ones to be like, oh, hey, earlier this really hurt my feelings. Let's talk about it. We're more of like, I'm going to hold on to this grudge until it manifests into something bigger and uglier. And then it's going to, until it's too big to ignore. And then we're going to duke it out.
Exactly.
Whereas whereas like the conversation where we had where, nothing intentionally there was nothing malicious about what you were saying, but how I received it was less than pleasant, right? It wasn't great. And it actually made me really upset. But instead of being like, hey, listen, Mom, that really hurt my feelings, I was like, oh, walls up.
Exactly. And I also too, during this entire journey, I think one of the things that I am like looking forward to the most is that in situations like this, I mean, I'm not perfect, and I'm not saying like, everything is perfect and resolved in my head, but I feel like I'm on a clear path. But I know that where I'm looking at this entire scenario is as your mom.
Sure.
And usually I never looked at it that way. I looked at it as, as like, we're all hurt.
Oh, sure. We're all victims.
We're all victims here. And you know what? Truthfully, I mean, yes, I am a victim of my childhood, but that has nothing to do with you and Brandon.
Sure.
So I can deal with that on a separate basis. What I need to do today is, again, deal with the situation that we're in right now and be like, hey, you know what? I'm your mom. I'm the one that should come to you and be like, hey, did I upset you?
Sure.
Whereas in the past, I would have been so like in my brain about like nobody, I'm just seen
nobody asked me how I was feeling when I was a kid. Yeah, that's fair. Yeah.
Just like, and it wasn't like, I don't want to come across as like it being like, well, what about my hurts? What about me?
Sure.
What about It was like, it was more of like, I couldn't get past my own hurt in order to put out that olive branch.
Sure. That's fair.
So
it's easy. I mean, it's easy to understand, because like, obviously what you went through in your childhood, obviously it hurt, and it must not have felt well. And those feelings are incredibly valid, and they're incredibly important. Right. But the fact that you're like, okay, hurt aside, how I felt as a kid does not reflect how I'm, going to act as the mother to my children. Kind of
exactly.
thing. And like, it almost breaks the cycle. Instead of being like, oh, well, if I had to do it, then, and nobody helped me, then, like I have just as much of a right to be upset and things like that, and not, you have to do that kind of stuff. Yeah. But I mean, it makes sense.
Yeah. Because I want to take, also too, like for step number 6, where it says take steps to fill the gap. It says right here, when you're younger, you fall victim to the circumstances because you are unable to rise against them.
Sure.
As an adult, you can take proactive steps to provide for yourself the things you wish you have as a child.
That's fair.
And I think that through all of my journey, it was almost like I was still expecting other people to provide that to me. And unfortunately, the majority of that burden has fallen on you. Yeah. And it is something that I apologize immensely for. Yeah. Because I have robbed you of a lot of happiness, even as an adult, being sober.
Sure.
So, and again, if I beat myself up too much, then it goes back into this big ugly cycle.
Yeah.
So the way I look at it is the best things that I can do from here on out is be that person to be like, hold on, let me just put my little mental self into check.
Yeah.
Okay, it's number 4. I need to embrace my emotions, where I can actually sit down and be like, wow, that just made me sad. Or wow, that hurt my feelings, or, that made me happy. I can own my emotions that I had hidden for so long.
Yeah.
And once I do that, I can turn around and be like, okay, now let's address this as us, sitting here together.
Yeah. Now, is that easier for you too, to like categorize it into different sections?
Oh, absolutely. Because otherwise it's like a blender in my head. Because I have so many emotions and there were so many hurts and just so many thises and that's.
Yeah.
It's like I can't see the picture clear unless I categorize them,
That's fair.
in my own head.
Yeah, that's understandable. I mean, it makes a lot of sense.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so that was just, I really wanted to address that. And I think where I'm going to take this next is, and it's not like we have all these issues every single day.
No, but they are in the hindsight of like most, debacles we have.
Yeah. And you know what? And the thing is like, if I say something and it is perceived in a different way, I can't stop it from being perceived that way.
Sure.
But I think over time and with enough communication of like, I think, you might be a little upset. I think it might be something I said.
Yeah.
Let's talk about it.
Yeah.
That's going to be a healing thing. And like, when Brandon does move back, Brandon's going to get the same form of communication.
Sure.
There's not going to be like that trigger.
Yeah.
It's going to be like, you perceived it this way and I'm sorry you did, but that's not how I that's not my intention.
This was my intention. Yeah. That's understandable.
Yeah. And hopefully by building a communication between you and me and then me and Brandon, you and Brandon can start to have like a healthy communication also.
Yeah. I mean, I think also too, the fact that Brandon, lives a little, we don't live together right now at the moment, and we don't have very much free time, nor do we have common interests. So I think, that if we're going to like pro and con Brandon moving back, one pro would be because we are in such close proximity. One day we might be like, hey, are you hungry? Do you want to go eat? Or like, hey, mom's busy doing so-and-so. Did you want to go walk indie with me? Kind of thing. So there will be more opportunities for Brandon and I to do activities together. And, the fact that we'll be more on like a level playing field in terms of communication, we might develop more of like a friendship.
Yeah. And you know what? And truthfully, at the very least, there just has to be a matter of respect for each other and your individuality.
Yeah. That's the case. I mean, I'm busy. We work, we all work, really going to work constantly. So it's not like we'll be like stepping on each other's toes, and it's not like I'll be in Brandon's room, dicking him around like we used to when we were kids. So, I think we're going to look at things a little bit differently in terms of perspective. And
I'm really excited that we started this counseling journey and that I have started this journey, because had we have not, it would have combusted in months.
Because it's already a little bit of a tricky situation with, Pam, Brandon's cat, and, the fact that we're going to be, it's 3 of us here now, and just, it's going to be a little challenging at first, but it's not going to be impossible.
Exactly. And that's just the whole thing. It's like there's going to be changes for everybody, including the indie, and that's just, she's outside.
She's right there.
Oh, she's just right there. And that's just the whole thing though. It's like, but change is okay.
Yeah. Well, I would say change is good.
Yeah. And I am, and truthfully, I'm super excited to be able to be like, I'm not going to smother mother you. I can offer you to move stuff over. Yeah. And then if you don't do it, then okay, then you don't do it. Yeah. I think where I kind of have come to realization is I can have a conversation and not have to try to censor my words before I say it.
I was just going to ask that. Like you can talk without constantly being afraid of upsetting somebody.
Exactly.
Because I know that's been a problem, or not a problem, but that's been something that's been concerning for you, is that, you can't say anything without Brandon and I being upset. Well,
it got to the point where everything I said was met with like hostility. Yeah. And now it's just like, again, it's like, well, that ain't my problem.
Yeah.
You know, I have to be responsible for my own actions. And it's not like you and Brandon are just like deciding to do this just for shits and giggles.
Yeah.
You're doing this because of years of the way the communication has been. Yeah. And it's really unfair for me to be like, well, I figured it out in my mind, so you all need to figure it out instantly.
Yeah, we'll just do what I do. But it's just to touch back on it, though. I remember there'd be times where you're like, well, everything I say is wrong. And I think that was a really interesting word choice where it probably maybe regressed back to your childhood where you couldn't, you didn't have an opinion or maybe like you were like constantly put down or something like that.
You know what? I was thinking about that the other day and I was just too scared to talk.
Yeah.
So I didn't have a voice.
Okay.
And I think it's not that it's bringing me back to that. It's just, I still feel like I'm being gagged.
Oh, okay.
I still like
censored.
Yeah. I'm still being censored and I still don't have a voice.
Yeah.
Even after all of these years.
Okay.
And I didn't know how to fix it.
Okay. Yeah. Interesting.
Yeah. And I think that this is just coming to the point where I know I do have a voice and, I am confident enough in my voice that if it is not perceived as intended, I can deal with it.
That's fair. Okay.
Yeah. Because we were mentioning how when Barbu accidentally called 911 instead of 411.
Yeah.
So what happened is my mom was trying to call information.
This was like 15, 16 years
ago. So you still called 411 to get a phone number. That's how long ago.
Oh God, I remember that.
Yeah.
This is, wow.
So
that's what 411 was about. You would call and be like,
can I have the number of Ralph's on 79 South? And some operator would tell you the phone number.
Yeah. Oh gosh.
Yeah. So my mom was trying to call 411. So instead of calling 411, she called 911.
Yeah.
So my dad was out in the garage and the cop came and actually had my dad at gunpoint. Yeah.
Because he didn't know.
He had no idea.
When she called 911, she called and then hung up.
Yeah. So they thought she was in trouble.
Yeah.
So my dad comes in with the police officer and he's like asking my mom, did you call 911? My mom adamantly denied that she did that.
Yep.
So then the police officer finally realizes that my dad's not like a harm to my mom, leaves. And then my mom instantly looks at my dad and goes, well, I did do that.
Yeah. She's like, well, I might have.
Yeah. So, and then we mentioned it yesterday and you're like, you would totally do that. And I can see why you would think that because in the past I was not confident in my voice.
Sure.
And that's why last night I was like, no, in the past, yes. And now I'd have been like, yeah, I did it. So what?
Yeah. Because you made a really good point. And like you said, you weren't as confident.
No.
You were like, whereas now you're like, yeah, my bad. Sorry guys, and and it's a really good point. And I think sometimes I'll look at you with those like post sobriety or like young, old mom kind of mentalities. Whereas now I don't, now I'm a little more cognitive of how independent and how confident you are.
Yeah. Because sometimes, and I think I've mentioned this on one of the podcasts, it's like, you almost don't know who I am today. You have a preconceived notion as who I am.
It's like a mirage. Your identity is kind of blurry, then it's in focus and it's blurry. And I can definitely say that because there's sometimes where I'll look at you and I'll interact with you as I should. And then there's other times where I'll interact and look at you as I used to. And it's not fair for you, but I can see where there'd be instances where I would blur the two.
Yeah. And you know what? And again, in the past, and it's not that it happens every time, but I'll be like, it used to trigger me again to where I would be like, there I go.
Yeah.
I am not being hurt. Everything
I'm wrong.
I'm wrong, right back to my inner child. Now it's like when that happens, I'll be like, well, he'll learn.
Yeah.
He'll see me one day.
Yeah.
He'll see who I really am.
Yeah.
And and truthfully, and I have the voice where if you actually, and it's not like you say really mean things. It's it's not like you've ever been like, oh, you're ugly or
no, but there are times where I'm a little harsh with my reactions, especially too, because like they're usually unprovoked. Usually there's something that like you say and then I'm like, well, and I kind of spit venom. And there's times when I'll walk away like, why did I say that? That was really mean. You know, mom was just doing this or that.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, there are.
See, but that's your growth. And that's really cool that you see that, because in the past, I mean, I can't crawl in your head and tell you what you would or would not have done. But in the past, it would have been like, well, I did this because mom's acting like that.
Yeah, sure.
Now you can look at it and be like, why did I do that? She didn't do anything.
Yeah.
Which is your own growth.
Well, I think generally, I was meaner then to stop the conversation because I didn't want to have any. And so it was just the fastest way to end the conversation so I could leave. Whereas,
well, Robert, you weren't being heard.
Yeah.
You know, you were in your office. I mean, and what's really amazing is like, once I got sober, I had this false idea of what I needed to do.
Sure.
And I would be like, you would be in your office trying to work, and I'd be like,
there'd be times where like, Mom, please leave. And you're like, I'm just going to lay down here. And then like you would try to like turn a gag and do it.
So, I mean, and I could sit there and be like, well, I was just playing around.
Yeah.
But that didn't alleviate the fact that you weren't being heard.
Yeah.
So when we have these conversations, I never want it to be where I'm like, God, Robert's being mean.
Yeah.
It's your reactions are from years of not being heard.
Yeah. There's two sides to every coin.
Exactly.
You know?
Just like there's inner child me, there's adult me. And sometimes when you are snappy, it's not adult you, it's inner child you.
Sure.
And when I look at it that way, when I'm like, you know what, he's not really trying to be mean to me, he's just lashing out because he's got something going on. It's like, again, I'm going from trying to parent you as a 4-year-old to parenting you as a 58-year-old.
Yeah. That's fair. It's understandable. Yeah.
Yeah. So that was my subject for the week.
I liked it. It was good.
Yeah. And hopefully it will give just more, like a stepping stone of more and more and more conversation that we can have, to where, you know what, maybe the next time something is said or, you know, if I do say something that you take in a way that I've not intended, instead of just putting that wall up, maybe you could be like, well, what do you mean by that?
Yeah, maybe a little bit more clarification, or maybe just looking at it as an adult, you know, and being like, okay, well, what was her intention of saying that? And if it, you know, because like you say, nothing you say, I mean, I would say never would you say anything maliciously. So there's always some sort of other intent applied to it. And it's how, like, again, it's how I receive it. How did I receive that? I received it as a threat or as a attack or something like that.
And go ahead.
And I just need people like, hey, you like, can you explain? You know, hey, this made me feel like this. I need more clarification.
Yeah. And I am by no means perfect, because sometimes words come out of my mouth that don't need to come out. Yeah. You know, sometimes I say things and I'm like, why did you just say that?
Yeah, exactly.
You know, but in the past, I was saying a lot of things to try to fill the dead air because there was no communication and it was like constantly kind of tense. Yeah. Now, sometimes I find that when I do say things that I probably shouldn't say, it's in those moments of where I feel like I said something to trigger somebody. And then all of a sudden it's like, I fall back into like,
well, like I remember, you know, like you said, you would fill the silence and you would just, you would say something about everything, and there something always had to been said. And so I think for me personally, it felt like your words didn't carry as much value.
They carried none.
You know, whereas now you're like, okay, well, she's saying something, so this must be important, and they carry a little bit more validity, and you know, it's not just like, you know, it's not just like the mom show where it's all gags, and you know, you're trying to like be the butt of the joke or the you know, the gag guy.
Well, like you always said, a lot of times people deal with hurt with humor. Yeah. You know, and that's kind of like what I was doing. And sometimes when I get insecure, I get kind of goofy. Yeah. And I think that the more I peel back this layers in this onion, and the more I explore my inner child, the less that it's going to be like that.
I agree. Yeah. So I liked it.
Yeah. Well,
it's pretty fun to do this, huh?
Yeah. And I really appreciate your, you know, interacting. And like I said, I didn't mean to cut you off when you were asking about that one. It just, I wanted to use that as the example of how I was doing this in everyday life.
That's fair. That's perfectly cool. Yeah. No, I liked it.
Yeah. What are you going to talk about next?
I want to talk, honestly, I was thinking about it, and I kind of want to talk about maybe doing more things by yourself, you know, because I was thinking about it, because like, you know, a lot of my adult life, a lot of my younger childhood, I think I stopped, I don't want to say younger child, but my early adult life, I think I stopped or didn't do something because I didn't have somebody to do it with. And then a lot of my later in adult life, I've done a lot of things by myself.
Yeah.
And I've learned a lot of, about myself by doing things. I've gotten into situations that I had to get myself out of, and, things like that. I think maybe more of like, I may or may not pursue it, but the idea of like doing things more independently.
Okay, cool.
Whether it be like going out and eating at a restaurant, or, solo traveling or solo hiking, or, something like that. Maybe doing something a little bit more for like that kind of avenue. Cool. I could now, also change.
If you do that, are you going to give like maybe like little steps on how to get to that point?
I would probably like do some research on like pros and cons, because a lot of videos I've seen, people are always talking about how much better it is to solo travel. How much better it is to do things by yourself. And I'd like to maybe explore a little bit about that, because I've met and I have done a lot of really, really cool things by myself, and how it kind of forces you to get outside of your comfort zone. Yeah. So I think I might expand something a little bit more on that.
Yeah, that's cool.
Yeah. Awesome, Mom. Well, do you want to tell them where to find us?
I would love to. You can find Robert as Robert Pike on Instagram, and then he is Sherbert on TikTok, YouTube, and Twitch. Yeah. You can find me as Gray Hair and Tattoos all across the board. I will add the 2 books and the article that I referenced on YouTube, because you can watch this now also too on YouTube, on the Gray Hair and Tattoos channel. And then also there's Emotional Baggage, my little travel, that channel there where you get to hang out with me as I explore the world.
Yeah, I like it.
All right. Thank you again, Robert. And I appreciate and love you very much.
I love you too.
All right.
Bye.
See ya, guys.